Good evening, friends. I welcome you all for the weekly meeting of Rotary Club of Gindi. Silent invocation. Yeah, thank you, friends. I request President to calling of the President. President Sharad.
The weekly meeting of the Rotary Club of Guinea is called to order.
Four-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you. I request Naresh Advani to deliver the thought for the day.
Thank you. I've been given a very interesting thought for the day, which comes by Swami Vivekananda. Take risk in your life. If you win, you can lead. If you lose, you can guide. I don't know how much this will employ in today's times. I leave it to the learned doctors who are here today to guide us through this particular phrase. Thank you so much, Balasar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nareshji. Thank you so much. Now I request President to welcome the gathering.
Welcome, friends, to this wonderful knowledge session, How to Conquer COVID. So everybody has been, listening about COVID for the last 6 months, and even if they haven't experienced it, but the word COVID seems to be the most unwanted word to be heard. But what to do? We have to live with the times. It looks like COVID is not going to end very soon. So now here we have two eminent doctors who have been working in this avenue COVID for the last 6-7 months, day in, day out. And we have Dr. Suresh Sheshadri and Dr. N. Kumarasamy, two experts on the subject, who are going to give us a thorough information and guide us how to prevent ourselves from being a victim of this, to follow during the session. And yesterday we had gone to Tiruvannamalai to hand over the award, the second Paropakari award, to Ms. Preeti Srinivasan. I tell you, friends, it is one of the most memorable days in my life. We had Preeti Srinivasan on video with us on a Zoom call, say last month, when we awarded a video award to her. It was something. We have seen her videos, we heard her speak and all that. It was different. But seeing her in flesh and blood and seeing how she works and how for the last 20 years she is undergoing the pain, and how the last 8 years she turned herself into a guide, a leader, a spiritual master to all the underprivileged people who have been affected by the similar problem like her, spinal cord injury. And amount of guts and courage that woman has is, you have to see it to believe. And we are also engaging with her, with her NGO Soul Free, for donating 125 very high-end wheelchairs to spinal cord injured patients. The project cost is around 21 lakhs. Yes, many people would be wondering, do you think this 21 lakhs would be possible in these times? Yes, when there is a will, there is definitely a way, and we will do. And after that, she also took her to her Inspire Center, where she has taken a block from the government hospital, and she's totally renovating it and bringing the first hospital, all in all hospital for the spinal cord injured patients, with rehabilitation center. They can stay, they can get cured, and they can have a better way of life. So with these, friends, I just end the welcome address. Thank you. Friends, in Jain Vocational, we have paid for 6 people to get trained in paramedical support. So this is an initiative in the Rotary India Literacy Mission. So with that, we have paid for 6 people, and they're going to train them 3 months paramedical support in association with Apollo Hospitals. We are doing it when the cost is around 45,000. We are doing it at a very subsidized cost of 4,400 rupees. And for the Teachers' Day, we are started a very innovative Teachers' Day award function, where we honor our own teachers, our school teachers, our college teachers. Not only us, ants and anettes can do that. and we have already 50 plus people who already registered for that. So the award function will be on October 5th, and outreach program with CTS, where we train the trainer. So 37 teachers are going to complete the course in another week's time, and the next batch of 92 teachers are ready. So in a span of 3 months, we have already covered close to 130 teachers. It's a great initiative from the vocational service director. Can we spotlight Satya and just give him a clap?
Naresh, I'm in a meeting. That's
Yeah, but still, guys, I think we can applaud him. Great, Satya, great. And from the community service development, we have Shrikant, who is taking care of this wheelchair project, an amazing project, a soul touching project for Soul Free. I think it's a good rhythm. Yeah. So we have already collected around 3 lakhs plus, and we have more promises. I think within this week, I think we will be able to touch the magic figure 5, and a lot of people have promised, and they said they will support. And I request all the members of our club to please do whatever is possible. No compulsion. It's all on your own will and wish. And Shrikant, thank you. Spotlight on Shrikant, please. Great, Shrikant. Great going. And on the community service health, we are planning to come up with our own permanent center, own permanent diagnostic center. So we still don't have full updates on that. So once we have more on that, we will let you know. And on the membership, we are now 101. It's great going. And the most important is the Rotary Foundation. Spotlight on Sheshan, please. Guys, really happy to announce that for this Rotary year 2021, our club has been awarded the first global grant in district, and our district RID 3232. Kudos, Sheshan, great work. And I should thank trainer Kadar and advisor J. Venu for helping us to apply this grant. And we have also another grant also waiting. So with this, we will have 2 grants ready, 6 dialysis machines at Savita Hospital in Tandalam, and another 6 dialysis machines in Port Blair, Andamans. So with this, we will be able to do 2 hospitals, 2 global grants with 12 machines. Great session. We can start the work on this, and we already have a lot of commitments from our members. We have close to, I think, US $14,000. Am I right, Session?
Yes, correct. That's right.
Yeah, great. And in the PR activity, we have a photo contest going on. Number Chennai la, Ninga in the area. So I think it's going good. I think as we get close to the time of September 23rd, I think we will get more people, uploading the photos. Great. And on the bulletin front, we have Prabhu, who has released August month bulletin. Great work, Prabhu. Amazing. And we have also included the sponsorship page in the bulletin this time. So members who are interested can please go ahead. So with this, I will end the avenue information. So now it's to you, Secretary.
Yeah, thank you, Sharath, for updation of Avenue information. Thank you so much. Now I request session 2, introduction of the guest speaker.
Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure and honor for me to introduce today's guest, Dr. Suresh Seshadri and Dr. N. Kumaraswamy, in conversation with our Rotarian Prashant and Rotarian Minarma Dariwal. A quick introduction about both our doctor guests. Dr. Suresh Seshadri, Director Mediscan Systems, Chennai, India. Honorary Secretary, Voluntary Health Services. Fetal Medicine Specialist, 38 years in ultrasound. Established a specialized twins unit with facilities for fetoscopy and laser for monochronic twins. Main areas of interest: prenatal diagnosis and fetal therapy. Working closely with NRHM and Tamil Nadu government to train doctors at PHC in basic obstetric ultrasound for reduction of birth defects. Member of the WHO Shiro expert group for birth defect surveillance and prevention. Trained over 4,000 doctors from India and other countries in ultrasound and fetal medicine. We have Dr. N. Kumaraswamy, is the Chief and Director of Infectious Disease Medical Center at Voluntary Health Services Hospital in Chennai, and directs the clinic which provides medical care for persons with HIV, hepatitis, tuberculosis, and other infectious disease in Chennai, South India. He is the director and site leader for the Chennai Antiviral Research and Treatment Clinical Research Site of US National Institute of Health, which conducts a multi-site therapeutic and prevention clinical trials. is a clinician and researcher in infectious disease with more than 25 years of experience and has published more than 400 manuscripts in peer-reviewed medical journals. He's an advisor and an expert panel member for the WHO ARV Treatment Guidelines Committee and a clinical advisor to Clinton Health Access Initiative. He has a particular interest on the long-term impact of antiretroviral therapy in resource-limited settings. He is serving as a member of the COVID-19 National Task Force for Clinical Research and Drug Development. Thank you very much. With this, I will hand it over to our distinguished guests and Rotarian Prashant and Virmal Dariwal.
Before we start the Q&A, why don't we ask Kumarasamy sir to give his insight on COVID?
Might be, I will request Dr. Suresh to tell a few words about our VHS hospital. Then from that, I'll take on the COVID. Is that fine? So there is a flow of events.
Perfect.
Yeah, Dr. Suresh. Yes.
Good evening. It's an absolute pleasure to be in this meeting of Rotary Club of Guindy and Sharath and all the other members who have gathered here today. First of all, thank you for inviting us. And just to say just a few words, that this is a 60-year-old community hospital which is for the community and by the community. And you know that we have a huge multi-speciality like neuro, maternal, child health, diabetes, de-addiction, blood bank, and Rotary plays a very big role in VHS. And there are many departments, including the blood bank, which has done a significant amount of work, which is one of the specialty areas of VHS. Now, VHS rose to the need of the community when the pandemic was announced, because the government asked which are the hospitals outside the government who would be where people volunteer. Because we felt it was our duty, and because next to the government, we were not a corporate hospital, so we could keep the cost down and we could give affordable care to a large portion of the population. And the transformation of VHS from a regular hospital to a COVID center. We started a COVID treatment center called VHS COVID Treatment Center. And this transformation has been quite magical, with the doctors and the support staff rising to the occasion. They all came and said, we are here and we are ready to do. Even though all of them, everyone was anxious, because self-protection was a very, very big thing. It was a very risky situation. And luckily for us, just renovated our emergency department in a very significant way with a generous grant from Fiat Chrysler. And then that served as we converted that into a COVID ICU very quickly. And that was the remarkable change that happened. And under the leadership of Dr. Kumarasamy and Dr. Yuvraj Gupta, we said, even though we said it's our duty to do this, but the devil was in the details. What happened was, every day there were new challenges. The challenges were, as far as the disease and the treatment was concerned, new protocols, there were new understanding of the disease. What we said yesterday, no, we have to change the protocol today. And as evidence care, the Indian Council of Medical Research was also pitching in, and the government was giving some directions of what to do. And we needed to go, almost every day there was a Zoom call with the government where things were discussed and things were changing. And we also had to quickly implement. So the biggest lesson with this pandemic told us is, any organization, any hospital, that you could change protocols just like that. Before normally what happens, if I want to change one thing, a practice which has been going on for several years, it was a huge task to get it changed across. Whereas this compulsion, it became absolutely essential to change it overnight. And that was quite remarkable. And the public, we had to handle public anxiety, the anxiety of the staff and their family, because many of the staff did not want to go home, because they said, after working in a hospital where are COVID patients, if I go home, they were worried rise nation to make sure that they were educated properly and then make sure they participated in a meaningful way. So it was a huge learning exercise in human resources, and keeping up the morale of the team was the challenge, which I think was absolutely remarkably done by Dr. Kumarasamy and his team, because every week he used to talk to the staff nurses, and every week he used to talk to the workers and make sure that all their comforts were taken care of. If they had any kind of complaint regarding their comfort, their stay, we are providing them food. So we provided them free food, a lot of things, I should say, and then make sure that they were ready for that. Because imagine a staff nurse working in that full PPE suit for 6 to 8 hours, where if they want to go to the toilet, they have to remove the entire suit and wear a new suit again. And that, PPE suits are not cheap; they are expensive. And but these people were absolutely marvelous. I'm very proud that I'm part of this VHS, and an opportunity has been given by the management for me to be there at this time. And I've seen what service to the community actually means. So with this, I will pass on the mic to Dr. Kumarasamy, who will tell you about the technical details about COVID treatment, and then we can go on to questions.
Sure. Thank you, sir. So thank you, Sir Dr. Suresh, for these kind words. And also, I thank the Rotary, particularly President Sharath and Secretary Bala and others for inviting us, for this your monthly meeting. I think the theme of this meeting is, how we can sensitize Rotary, how you can be, take appropriate precautions, which we all know that how you can prevent yourself, which you have been hearing. But on the other hand, what I'm going to walk you through is some of those activities in VHS, what we have done, and from that probably bring some signs and answer some of those scientific questions which your doctors in Rotary is going to put forward, and we'll throw upon questions from everybody. As you know that in March 18th, when in our Indian Parliament, it was announced that we have a pandemic, right? So that's a time everyone have been looking at this. Me personally, from the field of infectious disease, is the second pandemic I've been handling. Some of you here know that I've been going through all these, taking care of HIV infected people way back in 93, 94, when at that time, we had the pandemic evolved. So it was a great experience at that time. Whatever I learned, today I was able to translate in this COVID. So when this government announced on March 18, quickly what we did in the VHS hospital is, so we set up a VHS COVID task force team under our leadership of Dr. Suresh, with all our key consultants, and I took the lead as a COVID task team member. So we met together and did, how we should respond this, because we are known to provide ethical, affordable, scientific care for people coming with any disease, and also going with the community, for prevention. This is something what VHS is known for. So we have been discussing, I had the opportunity to, examine the first COVID case in our hospital sometime in the March last week. So that was the first case, we never had a PPE kit with whatever we had. I still remember that day, everyone was running around, I was brave enough to examine the patient, make sure that, and speak to the families. Since then, we again met back as part of the COVID task force, and we developed our in-house protocol. Now, these are some of the things I'm talking much before government started developing their own expert group and their guidelines, even ICMR, we started responding. So when we, again, VHS is not just COVID, we have been known to do diabetic care, state-of-art neurology care, HIV care, maternity care, and so on and so forth, here. Again, we wanted to set up an environment not only to care people, but also a safety environment for other patients, non-COVID, who come to our hospital. This is something where the whole public has been apprehensive about. So we set up a triage unit in our outpatient clinic through the emergency room. Anyone who's coming there, they are appropriately handled, both for the protection to our own healthcare staff and as well as to the patients. So we set up what is called the triage. We developed a small symptom questionnaire, And based on that, if someone has got blah, blah symptoms related to COVID, then, we requested them for testing before they get, inpatient care. Or if they have been acutely ill, they have been kept in a suspected area till the report is come. So we started this almost from the last week of March. At that time, in the VHS hospital, we didn't have the testing facilities in the laboratory. So we networked with the commercial labs to do this. And since late April, so our lab helped to set up these molecular diagnostics, and we got an NABL approval and ICMR approval to do this. Since then, anyone who comes there with the suspected COVID, we had the opportunity to do this diagnosis in-house in the VHS hospital. It's not just for testing and for suspecting. There are also a significant number of people who are tested outside, either by the corporation or other private hospitals. They came to the care. So that made us to set up a dedicated COVID outpatient clinic along with the emergency room, trying to all the doctors, because it has been 24 hours, with a clear protocol what to do with them. So till today, I feel proud to say that through our emergency room and through the telephones, we have cared more than 1,000 people who are being infected with COVID. It is not an easy joke, to do this, which we are able to do, very successfully. And again, as I said earlier, VHS is known for scientific, affordable, and ethical care. So we don't hospitalize everybody, as you see in many other hospitals and as well as in the media. So we have a strict criteria for inpatient care. Who really needs admission, many of them can be cared at home. So based on this criteria, we hospitalize patients who are really needy. In COVID disease. So we got different classification: asymptomatic, no symptoms; mild symptoms with minor like fever, cough, sore throat, body pain; and moderate and severe, who have shortness of breath, where oxygen saturation is 94, who really need. So we hospitalize people only who really need admissions. And till today, I just got the statistics from my statistician, and we have hospitalized 265 people, who really need an admission or who had been suspected and who really needed admission because they have been, sick with some of those complications. And as Dr. Suresh said, that in such a short time in VHS, along with an outpatient clinic, we are also able to set up a dedicated COVID ICU, which is a 10-bedded ICU with all the ventilators, CPAPs, and with a very trained, we have which is led by Dr. Silamban, who has been our, intensivist and the chief of anesthesiology, who's got enormous experience, both from the government, from other private, who leads a team. And people who don't need acute care, we also have individual rooms, which we have got 16 rooms. We call it as COVID A. And also, we also have semi-private facilities called COVID B and COVID C. So till last week, our facility was catering only around 25 to 28 patients. But now, since this week, we are able to take care of up to 55 patients who really need admissions. So out of those 265 people who have been admitted, the median age it's more than 65. So that means many of them who need admission, they're elderly. Not just they had this COVID disease, but also a lot of other comorbidities, diabetes, hypertension, malignancy, HIV, hepatitis, and so many strokes and so many things. So here we are able to bring in a multi-speciality team. In VHS, we do have the diabetologists, neurologists, and we are able to do appropriate management. Now, coming to our success rate in our inpatient care, so you all see the numbers like case fatality rate, what the government gives, like 1.5. That is a mixture of everybody. If you look into the denominator, everyone asymptomatic, everyone is being pulled into that. So then here I'm talking about our success rate. These are all people who are oxygen saturation less than 94 out of 265 patients. We have 22 deaths, remaining all were being very successfully managed, and many of them gone back to their normal routine life. So if we compare our statistics with many of those hospitals in New York and Europe, in Italy and Spain, where they managed severe cases, they had a mortality of anything from 15 to 30%. Here in our hospital is less than 10%. These are all really sick patients. And government, again, have not released the data because they do not have the appropriate data on all those severe cases and how many have been died. And what I heard from some of those other private hospitals in Chennai is up to 22 to 25%. We have been much lower. That clearly shows our strict protocol. And again, as Dr. Suresh said that, we are very ethical, very scientific. We follow treatment guidelines as well as we develop our own guidance. And me being a member of the ICMR task force, I had an opportunity to smell all these even much before, it comes as a guidelines, and we are able to implement in VHS for the benefit of our patients. So today we see anything from 7 to 10 new COVID patients in our clinic. In fact, today I examined 12 new COVID cases, not of those 2 we hospitalized. So this is all we are able to do in such a short time. Again, as Dr. Suresh said, that it is not just a single person, it is a collective team, and we have dedicated doctors, consultants, and our duty doctors, and such a nightingale-like nurses at this time. They peaked at the right time. Our paramedics, sanitary staff, and all our consultants, and I should not forget our management was the highest level of support. Now, when we wanted to do this, the first person who said, yes, we should go in the best way is Dr. Suresh, and which was also well supported by our hospital director, Yuvraj. Until now, we have the highest support for our administration to move this, forward. So other than taking care of these patients in VHS, we also been doing research in COVID patients. As many of you know that we are also known to do several research in infectious diseases as well as in diabetes and in fetal medicine here in VHS. So, and here when COVID came, WHO, identified our hospital as one of the sites to carry out these solidarity clinical trials where we have been testing different COVID medications. And in one of those, which has now come as guideline, is remdesivir, which we have been involved in doing these clinical trials. Also now, we have been supported by National Institute of Health, NIH in the US, to carry out newer medication, which will be starting anytime soon. Also now, we are also being identified as a site to carry out vaccine trial for COVID, for people who have been negative, as a phase 3 trial. Also, we have been now set up some basic science studies, particularly can we use certain fluids like saliva to diagnose COVID, which we have already experimented, and we found fantastic results now coming for publications. Also, all those 1,000-odd patients, what we have seen, now we have developed an observational database, which we have an IT team working on, getting this data into these computers and getting it analyzed, trying to understand, is this a new disease, how it is teaching us a lesson, to care better for our future patients, which we can see many, many more scientific publications from our VHS in terms of, COVID. So again, it's not just we manage of COVID. We also, did deliveries on women who were pregnant and with COVID. We did surgeries, even including complicated bone surgeries. And also, we have been carrying out dialysis, in COVID patients. So this is something, where VHS quickly responded, in this, pandemic. And we are able to do all those, is thanks to the support from many people, So we had multiple donors, from variety of different walks of life, and also particularly Rotary directly and indirectly helped us even in COVID. And also we have a support from Rotary, especially to do telemedicines. They have been, supporting up with an equipment and a dedicated number, which one of our staff has been manning that, to take care of all those queries public come through. So in a nutshell, today, VHS is a dedicated COVID testing center and as well as a COVID treatment center, both as an outpatient as well as an inpatient facility, also a COVID, research center. I think with this, I'll stop, and probably I will look forward for the discussion among the members.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Suresh and Kumarasamy, for an insightful 360-degree view of the services you provided at VHS. Doctors, just quick update. A lot of people are waiting to hear from you how we can prevent it. Because mainly they are worried because now after the technical end of the lockdown 4, a lot of people are moving and you see traffic everywhere, people everywhere. So now even everybody has started going to their offices, work, and other places. So now people are asking questions which they haven't asked earlier. So Prashant, so you can just take us through. So you can ask both Suresh and Dr. Kumarsamy's opinion. And we will just have each questions very crisp and answers so that we can cover a lot of topics and give everybody a chance to ask them questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Suresh sir and Kumarasamy sir. And it gave all of us a beautiful view of all the work done by VHS. And of course, it is a very medical colleges, institutions, because every day, like Suresh sir said, every day protocols keep changing. The government keeps guiding us differently on every day basis. So to start with, who requires hospital administration? Who requires isolation? And which patient requires quarantine?
Right. So before this, President Sharath, put up a question. I think that's a very important question for everybody. How do you prevent ourselves? As you know well that this COVID disease is caused by a virus called SARS-CoV-2. This spreads, through till today with the available science is through air. It's an aerosol and as well as through the droplet. And also different studies have shown these aerosols are, if you look into the diameter, it is less than 5 nanomicron. It is very hard to prevent it. And also droplet, which is more than 5 nanomicrons, which if you wear a mask or a cloth or anything, which can be prevented. But aerosol, even if you wear a cloth, the cloth mask, it's so difficult to prevent it because it's an aerosol, very so nice. That's what we recommend, especially in places where COVID patients are there, or there is a possibility of transmission through the air because of the many people with suspect or COVID. We tell them to use N95 mask. But the droplets can be prevented even by a cloth mask. So to your question, how do you prevent yourself? So certain diseases like malaria, I can tell you, don't get bitten by mosquitoes. But still, it's very difficult in a city like Chennai. We are all bitten every day, left and right, by the mosquitoes. Very hard to prevent. We are not able to prevent malaria, which can be prevented by using so many ways. And take about HIV, which can be very easily prevented, but still it has been spreading. But on the other hand, this type of airborne infections, even whatever precautions you take, still there are possibilities will get affected. And then don't try to blame yourself or your family member, hey, you did this, do that, because this spreads through aerosol and every possibilities. Now, again, having said this, don't, okay, then why should I care ourselves? There are every possibility, 99%, where you can protect yourself if you take proper precaution. Now, today, the current available evidence is to protect is wear mask everywhere. Step out of your home, everywhere. Even in your home, any of your family members are being coughing around, tell them to wear a mask as well as you also being, keep a distance. We always tell in our medical science, you should keep more than 6 feet distance, where then only if somebody is been coughing. Again, in a situation like this, in our offices or in our workplace or in our home, getting a 6 feet is so tough. So it's going to be difficult, but still we have to work on a way how we can, prevent this ourselves. And since President Sharath threw up open question, many of you have opened your office. I assume most of your offices are air conditioned. And, I know very well that in Chennai, we all have cluttered workspaces where in a small room, anything from 2% to 20%, sit and work. And we all have air conditioners and many of them have minimal ventilation. This is something what we have been used in this modern world. I think this is a big enemy today to COVID. So I think when you have been running such offices, which many people have been doing, definitely you have to physically distance them. It's very, very important. It might be very difficult, but you have to find ways. If you don't have enough space, make sure that if you have 20 people in one big hall, only ask them to come only 6 or 7 people, give them a rotation, or change your site. You start your work from morning 7 o'clock. By 1 o'clock, you send one group out. Another group asks them to come by 2 o'clock, and you can do that. Now, these are some of the things you should work on so that, a crowding around in your workplace can be prevented. And number 2, very importantly, since I said about these air conditioners, I think if we can avoid air conditioners, it will be good. But again, in this modern world, many of our offices are not equipped to non-air conditioners. So at that time, better keep your windows open, even if you put air conditioners. That's another way where there will be airflow out. And it won't keep circulating, inside your room, and thereby people can be affected. And also, don't keep your air conditioners at so chilly. Which we all love to have a temperature like 21 or 20, but keep it 24 and above. There are some science shows that these virus viability can be very minimal if it is 24 and above. So, but that's something which we can use it. And also, if your offices has got both an air conditioner and fan, I suggest if you wanted to put an air conditioner, put a fan at a high speed, because that will drive away these aerosols and dilute out of those system or drive out through these windows. That's something what you can be doing in your office. And of course, now government and everybody have been giving advisories where you can have this temperature check, and also counsel all your staff, anyone who is not well, not to come to office, go for testing, and generally give them leave, paid leave. If you don't do that, they will hide all those and take a paracetamol and hide everything sitting in your office. I think these are some of the things will really help you to prevent infection. If you can prevent yourself, you can prevent infection in your family members and particularly to the elderly people. And one other thing before I stop on this transmission is, there are a lot of things on fomit transmission. Fomit transmission is from the surface transmission. You might be knowing that in the last week of March and April, May, everybody were washing everything on the floor, throwing upon hypochlorite, everything. Even they are splashing hypochlorite on somebody's face and over on their shirt and everything. That really we do not know whether COVID spreads like this. But there are some studies shows this virus can be alive in certain surfaces, anything from 6 hours to even up to 3 days. But these are all theory. Whether that particular virus, which has been there for 3 days, can transmit the infection, we do not know. It's viable. Viable is different from transmitting infection. So that's something which we do not know, but still, people have to be careful, keep cleaning your surface, particularly with sodium hypochlorite solution, and also make sure that your offices are very clean. And, our shoes can carry a lot of infections. So people can leave some of their footwear outside your office. And this is some of the things where, and definitely avoid handshaking and hugging, which I'm sure we all practice, and not coming and speaking into somebody's ears and do that. And people who are not wearing glasses, but if you can, get some goggles if too many people wanted to speak. Avoid having physical meetings. You can have this type of online meetings. These are some of the things where you can, prevent, reduce. I will use the word reduce this transmission, in our both settings. Yeah, I'll stop here. Right. So now coming to this question on, who needs to get admitted. So I'll tell you, how these COVID causes these diseases. This is a typically respiratory virus. It spreads in the air through aerosol. So the minute when it enters, either through your nose or through the mouth, we have got enterocytes and gastrointestinal epithelium. This particular virus uses, this is, I'm sure you would have seen in the media many times. It has got a, corona. Why this word called coronavirus came is, it has got a crown-like structures in the electron microscope. When you look at through the electron microscope, it has got crown-like structures, small like projections, spike-like proteins. So these are responsible for causing this viral transmission and the disease. And among all these different protein, there is one particular protein called S protein, we call spike protein, which is responsible to get attached into the human surface and cause a disease. So what it does is, once it enters through the nose or through the mouth, it goes and gets into these, the epithelium we call in the nose or the mouth, and through the mucosa. There are certain receptors we call AC2 receptor. It uses this receptor and gain entry. And there are a lot of these viral replicative pathways happens. And while doing so, it gets multiplies inside the cells. It releases certain chemicals we call cytokines or called chemokines, which causes destruction to our various organs, to kidneys, to the lungs, to the liver, which causes all these diseases. But this doesn't happen in everybody, it's depending upon the individual. There are individuals whose immunity is well intact, particularly in young people, or particularly in people who don't have other diseases like HIV or diabetes or hypertension. We assume they have good immunity. So this host system, immune system, won't allow the virus to react to cause all those different release of these cytokines and chemokines. So in such individuals, either they may not experience any symptoms, or they can have some minor problem, like a body pain, like any other viral fever which we all develop, like a sore throat, running nose, or a mild cough, or a body pain. And one of the things which we are seeing is something like, change in smell, which still now we do not know the exact, science behind it. We think it affects certain nerves which is responsible for smelling, or loss of taste. These are all minor symptoms. So these people, individuals, we don't need any hospitalization. We treat them as an outpatient. But also, while designing these, we have certain criteria, where some of them, when they comply, we also do certain blood investigation, which we can find out whether they're prone to develop a complication. We can do the blood tests like IL-6 and D-dimer, which are some of those cytokine release where we can identify. Based on that, we take decision whether these individuals need admission. But on the other hand, when this disease progresses, particularly in individuals who are elderly, 60 plus, or people who have got profound other low immunity diseases like diabetes, hypertension, cancers, HIV, bronchial asthma, what it does is it produces severe disease in the lung, producing a pneumonia. As a result, people develop a breathing problem. We call shortness of breath. This can be measured, as you all know, that using a very inexpensive procedure called pulse oximeter, where it is an indirect measure, shows how much someone's oxygen saturation is. In normal people, it should be anything should be 98 to 100. Why this oxygen saturation is important is, which you all know that, so this carries, our oxygen is carried through this blood into various organs, delivering this oxygenation. So if this oxygen saturation is less, then the delivery to the organs will also be less, and thereby the organs will be malfunctional, dysfunctional, and can, fail also. So someone whose saturation is less than 95, the organs will start reacting and producing this damage. So those individuals need admissions. So these are the individuals, when they need admission, we need to take care of their oxygen by giving supportive oxygen through nose, nasal oxygen, high flow. Or if they are finding difficult to breathe at that time, we need to give supportive respiratory support through ventilators or through equipments called CPAP, which these people need admissions. Also, when they get admitted, I said their organs can fail. So we need support for organs, preventing organ damage. And also today we have a drug called remdesivir, which you would have seen in the press and also in the media. Now, this is the only today approved antiviral drug, which has got an action on this virus. Now, particularly in people who have got an oxygen saturation of less than 95 or less than 94. So you need to hospitalize them because the treatment course is anything from 5 days to 10 days. Because you can't give us an outpatient, you need to hospitalize them. And also someone, when they are being worsening of their existing condition, like diabetes, hypertension, the cancer, then they need a hospitalization so that the whole team, can manage them. I think to your question, who needs admissions? When someone who has been progressed. When people who are asymptomatic and mild, they don't need a hospital, but they need to be quarantined from others. So today what had happened is, when this pandemic came, people didn't know what to do with them. And also many of those individuals, don't have enough space at home because people live in a nuclear family with 1 or 2 rooms, houses where they need to be moved out. So in India, particularly in Chennai, we didn't have, at that time, we are not prepared with the quarantine homes. So only place is the hospitals where they have rooms. So they'll be hospitalized and, these are all unneeded, where because the cost and huge task on the health force and the big burden on everybody. I think this individual don't need an inpatient care, who really need is who are moderate and, severe disease.
Thank you, doctor. Excellent, excellent, excellent. But doctor, a small request. We actually need, to hear more about you because you've been so passionately talking about this. We have a lot of questions. So can we have, short answers from you so that we can, everybody has a chance to ask you questions?
Sure. Since I spoke a lot on the pathogen, hereafter I don't have much to speak.
No, doctor, because everybody has some question. A lot of these questions might look very, very silly to you, but
Sure.
People are confused. When people get cold, they go to the medical shop, buy loads of medicines. They buy paracetamol, azithromycin, C, B, D, A, F, whatever it is available, they put everything. So just give them small tips so that they can be at ease. Yeah, Prashant.
Okay, thank you, sir. And one of these things, what you mentioned, since the offices are open and since many employees are coming back, do you think any particular test or a screening should be done before they join work, or on day-to-day basis it can be done, or a particular test? Or see, many people approach us asking for RT-PCR to be done for their employees, or antibody to be done. Which do you think is preferable, or just a screening questionnaire? If they have any symptoms, they just avoid coming to the office, or do we really have to do the test? Because many of our members are running offices, so it will be very useful for them.
Yeah. So, so I think this is a question everybody gets it. I think quick answer is definitely no. Don't do testing. It's not going to help you. It will waste all your resources. So as I said earlier, it spreads through the air. So you can do a testing today before you enter your office, and the person goes home. He can pick up on the way, even in a public transport, or in their community, or the evening they may go to a grocery store. They can pick up an infection. So that means you will assume that this person is negative in the earlier day testing, and you'll have a false sense of security there. You may not take a proper precaution. So this type of testing is not going to be helpful. But on the other hand, when you said about antibody testing, so what is this antibody? Somebody develops a COVID today. So after 6 weeks, within 6 weeks, the body will react on this virus, start developing a substance called antibody to fight against this virus. They'll start developing from 6 weeks onwards. So someone who has got an antibody, so that means that they are already exposed to the virus. Either they have been diagnosed as COVID, or unknowingly they would have been exposed without knowing, because many times almost 75% of them, these individuals will be asymptomatic. So they have been exposed. Then you may ask a question, are they really safe? So we all know that, when someone have an antibody, so that means unlikely they will develop this disease again immediately. But on the other hand, now reports have started coming on reinfection. People who are already been infected, diagnosed, managed, they're cured of this virus, their virus has got out, they develop an antibody, again infecting. Now reports come from Hong Kong, China, in the US. And I'll tell you, even I'm not discussing with Dr. Suresh yet, today we had a patient, we have been hospitalizing again. This is a patient who has been in our hospital discharged a month back. Now again came with symptoms. We did a testing, and last night the test has come as positive. So now we have been working on whether it is a really reinfection, or probably the old infection is still not cured. It may take time. So I think to your question on antibody testing, sometimes can be challenging, because of this reinfection. I think you can do tests for the benefit of them, where they are positive, link them to treatment and quarantine. But to be safe on your side, it will give a false sense of security for the reason what I said.
Yes, Dr. Prashant, Dr. Suresh Seshadri has an international meet right now. So let me ask him a few questions. Dr. Suresh, we have been hearing, a lot of people, talking so many things about, inhaling, the vapors from hot water, or, turmeric water, or inhale water. You can put Vicks and inhale and all that. What's your thought on that?
I think a lot of remedies, codeine and many other things have been said. But essentially, the whole thing is about prevention of the viral particles getting into you. That is, which is what Kumarasamy said, social distancing is the only way. I think the other things are, we try to protect ourselves in whatever way possible. But there is no specific scientific evidence for any of them.
So doctor, are you saying that inhaling the steam and all that will not help?
I mean, it is going to be there for that moment. After once the steam goes away, then what happens? After that, if they go and get exposed after that for 15 minutes later, you can't be continuously inhaling steam, isn't it?
Exactly.
So once the virus goes.
So let me add what my impression of Dr. Suresh is. For me, Dr. Suresh is a legend. Okay. And he's a professor right now. I do not know how many people know that, but I'm very glad that he's been honored with this. And if before he leaves, I've been given the job of giving you the vote of thanks.
Yeah.
Yes. So I would like to give the vote of thanks in the presence of Dr. Suresh. I don't know where to begin with, because when I joined radiology, I learned from him. When my daughters had to do something, they went to his center. So this is a personal thanks, but he is someone who is exceptional, and we are in the presence of a legend. Thank you, sir.
I'm truly humbled.
Yeah. Any other people who want to ask Dr. Suresh any questions before he leaves in another 3-4 minutes? Yeah. Jagiba, you wanted to ask something, please?
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
Okay. No, this may sound a little silly to a doctor as senior as.
I already told him we'll have a lot of silly questions.
Okay. Well, doctor, these corporation sends out these young girls who come with one Chinese-made, the thermometer thing which they come and hold against your forehead. I very much suspect whether most of the time it's correct, because they showed it once on my servant and they said, my God, 105. I took it from them and I saw it was 100.5. I don't think they know the difference between 100.5 and 105. That was one issue. Second thing is, they go about announcing that anybody who's got the slightest of symptoms, please come to these camps, which the corporation is organizing. Just to see what happens there, I happened to go there. My God, I got scared. The least amount of social distancing is followed over there. People are just standing, absolutely close to each other. And the kind of hygiene which I could see there was really deplorable. So I want to ask you, I am one of the high-risk cases because I'm 67 years old. Otherwise, I don't have any comorbidities. But do you think I should also go and visit one of these camps when they announce, on Sunday or something? Or do you think if I don't have any symptoms, it's not required?
I think first of all, regarding the temperature screening device, any screening device which you use has certain limitations and has got false positives and false negatives it can do. These are technologies which were developed, and when you develop technology like this and put it on a mass scale, it is just to give you a reasonable idea, somebody to filter. I don't think these thermometers are very accurate. So that is, but in spite of the fact, what happens, a chain starts and everybody follows. Then after some time, after that, the only thing is you can't use a thermometer inside your mouth because that becomes contact.
Yeah.
So any contactless device, for want of a better screening device, this is the best that could be managed for this kind of a situation. So we just try to live with it. As far as the screening camps in corporation, I agree with you. See, we have to look at this whole pandemic in the light of India's population. And in an urban city like Chennai, the denseness of the population is simply overwhelming. And the corporation has a mandate to get as many people as possible into their fold. And I should say that they have really been working overtime. And for example, we did a test for somebody yesterday. The result was available at 10 p.m. at night, yesterday night. Today morning, 7 o'clock, the corporation people were in the house of that individual.
Yes.
We found your strain positive. You better come and we will take care of you. Now that tells you that there is a system in place, which is what in this kind of pandemic we should appreciate, that they have done something, and these people who go around, they are simply working their heart out trying to get things done, and they are saying we are doing it for your good because we've been told that this is the way to do. But the public are very afraid because they don't want to be transported into some obscure quarantine place and then get distance from the family and all that. So every effort is done by the family not to go away with the corporation person. It's like people feel they're going to a jail or something like that. So that is it's an emotional disaster on both sides. The corporation worker gets, because they get caught if they are not doing their job right, for not doing the job, whereas the public are resisting it. So amidst this fight, I think they have done a marvelous job.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Suresh.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, sir, to your question on should you go to a camp? I think when you are being totally asymptomatic, no symptoms, I think it's not needed. The camp is going to be screening you. Do you have fever? Do you have the symptoms? Do you need a test or not? That you yourself can decide. You don't have a fever, no body pain, no sore throat. I think you should not risk going outside, to acquire this virus. So I think better be at home.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions to Dr. Suresh? Then we will take. Then we will flood Dr. Kumarasamy with questions. One last question to Dr. Suresh. Anyone?
Dr. Sir, good evening. Can you give me your feedback about that Kavazura-Kodinir, whether it is positive or like that?
Doctor, you have to unmute yourself, doctor.
Both Kumarasamy and myself agree that it doesn't work. That's the simple answer I can give you. Yeah. It actually causes a lot of gastric symptoms in some people.
Yeah, that's true.
Then, doctor, you have to advise us on what we have to take then.
Yeah. So what we do in our hospital is keep taking the normal food and healthy food, whatever you're eating, and also depending upon the needs for the diabetic and renal diet and all these do. So, and we make sure that they have a little more protein-rich food, and also anything what will have a good immunity in that, like, fruits which are all rich in vitamin C, because you need to boost their immunity. So coming to these, whatever Kavazura-Kodinir, I still cannot, pronounce very well. We don't have a proof, what it all. So if you look into that, many of the things are all part of our common food, like tipili and whatever, chukku and everything, which you do it. But there are certain things what they add really cause, severe gastritis to our patients. We ask them to keep drinking in the morning, afternoon, night. Already they are sick. For asymptomatic, mild symptomatic doesn't matter. But people moderately and severely ill, they are sick with complications, oxygen flowing, and they are being so sick. Over the top, if you give them, they puke on you, or they are not happy with that. And we don't have proof. And also, it is not going to cure this virus. You're going to drink it. I don't know in what ways. We don't have a proper proof. So we don't give it to anybody. In fact, there are some patients demanded, we gave, and they also stopped because it produced gastritis. Otherwise, we don't recommend it as part of our routine care.
Dr. Kumarasamy, a small question here again. This is Dr. Vishnu Srinivas, radiologist.
Yep.
What is the role of vitamin D? Because majority of our population is deficient, including myself, and I had to, supplement myself.
Right. So in this disease, now people have been talking about people who are being deficient of vitamin D. They are prone to pick up this infection. Now these are all from retrospective reviews. We have been doing. So again, you yourself said that, you look so healthy, you're healthy, but your vitamin D is low. And also, if you do everybody, like a normal population, almost 85% of them, based on the published studies in India, shows they have low vitamin D, despite we have all the bright sunlight and everything. And we have been out most of the time, not like in certain European countries where they get back home, very early. We are all out most of the time. So that one of the reasons is probably the normals in Indians might be very different. Nobody have done a proper study. What is a real normal vitamin D level in India? The normals in the US and Europe might be different from India. Many times because we use these imported testing kits, and we take from the package insert of their own normal values. So it may not be true. We have been seeing so many people, including healthy people, they live like a normal people with a low vitamin D and go through their 90 years or age with that, not producing any complications. So I think now there is a habit of supplementing too much of vitamin D in that, which we don't do routinely on a need basis. Someone, if it is associated with the osteoporotic change or some of those other bone-related complications, then worth to do that. Otherwise, no point in doing. Again, coming in COVID disease, we don't do this for asymptomatic and mild symptomatic. We don't do at all. It's not going to help. Someone who is really sick, so probably this can help us as support, not as a real cure treatment or anything. And we have to be very careful in giving medicines. I keep seeing COVID patients who are treated by other doctors from other places. They come with a big laundry list of medications. Many medicines, 3 different antibiotics, and so many different types of vitamins, multivitamins, vitamin C, zinc, and everything, and all those. And some of them say that our whole, stomach is filled with this medicine. What we will eat. I think we have to be very careful when giving this. Particularly people who are very sick. When you load them with such things, I think the pill burden itself will be an issue. At this time, we don't have any definite evidence to say that vitamin D cures this COVID. Or, but on the end, it's a supplementation. It can be done on a case-to-case basis.
It's considered to be a respiratory vitamin. So, what's your opinion on that?
It's all theoretical, sir. But we don't have any randomized clinical trial, except some of those retrospective reviews have shown people who had severe disease, they have low vitamin D. So nobody had done a prospective clinical trial to show that in some group of people with vitamin D, another one, the placebo, shows that people with vitamin D, did very well.
Excellent. So I think Prashant, so Dr. Vishnu Srinivas has taken the role of Dr. Vinamra Dhariwal. So
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but
no
it was too tempting a question.
No, absolutely. See, we want the conversation to be as as lively as possible, and we have Rotarian Amuldu who wants to ask a question.
Good evening, sir. This is Parimala Amuldu here.
Hi.
Actually, when COVID had started in 127 days, we had crossed 2 million. But now, after relaxation of the lockdown, within 10 days, we are touching 1 million. This is a media report which I am saying. Then what's the use of raising the lockdown? I don't think prevention is being continued. Now people are let scot-free and we say they have to live with COVID. But then the prevention goes. I think that just wearing masks and going and safeguarding ourselves is not enough. Prevention should continue, I feel. Raising of lockdown is not that COVID has gone. People are thinking that we can go around walking here, there, and we can live with COVID. But it's not so. I think prevention should be taken more by the government. Is it so, doctor? It's my doubt here.
Yeah, I think it's an important question, but you yourself answered to your question very well. So I think here we use the word lockdown and lockdown is relaxed. I think we should not think that we got away with all those infections. If you see these numbers, what we are seeing today in India, 50 lakh people, about 5 million people are already been infected. And in our own state of Tamil Nadu, 500,000 people, that means 500,000 people already been infected. So, and also if you see the numbers, day by day is increasing. And again, I still feel it's all underreported in Tamil Nadu, something around capped something like 5,599, every day if you see this, and in Chennai around 1,999 and all those. Still, definitely I feel underreported, but anyway, let us not debate. This is not a television channel to debate. So, but still the infections are there. Now people are all out, more and more transmission we'll expect. I think we have to take appropriate precaution. I think one thing we should think that this lockdown is lifted not because we have controlled the infection. Lockdown is lifted for various reasons. We all have to live. We need to have the world to move on. With the economy, so much have been broken, and people are all very different. Everybody, whether you're starting from rickshaw puller to people who own a Mercedes-Benz showroom, everybody have been broken. So I think for various reasons, lockdown is lifted. But one thing, the lockdown, then you may ask a question, what the hell you medical expert recommended for the lockdown in the month of March, April, May, and June? Because I sit in the national task force, not in the Tamil Nadu one, but the national one with ICMR. I serve in the member of the task force. Now, we all recommended all those lockdown and minimal lockdown and all those. This is to buy time, So we don't want all our hospitals to get burdened on a single day, which happened in Europe. You saw in Italy, people have no idea how to admit a patient, and they are not prepared. It happened in New York and many countries in Spain. Here, we bought time ourselves to prepare ourselves, our hospitals. As a healthcare force, even in our VHS hospital, we prepared ourselves, educating doctors, educating nurses, raising funding to protectives. So because there was less transmission in the community because they were in lockdown. And also we also learned, how to manage all those. If in India, that lockdown would not happen in the March last week and April, I'm not supporting our government or anything. I'm not pro or anti, but I'm saying that probably we would have seen this, 50 lakhs thing probably in April itself. If that would have happened, what would have happened to our healthcare workers? We would have lost many, many people. In India, now probably if that would have happened, might be 3 or 4 times people would have died not because we don't have knowledge on that. We don't have workforce. And today when 10 acute people come to me, I can manage them very well. But on the other hand, if 30 people who need ventilators come to me, I do not know, how to manage them. So, in such a short span of time. So this is something what we bought time. So for people, slowly. So I think we should not take with this lockdown relaxed, okay, everything is fine to do that. I think we should tell this to all our colleagues, even our own family members, our, domestic households, our drivers and everyone, stating that lockdown is lifted is for all you to live, so you have to take enough precaution.
But I don't think so. Just for the sake of economy, the life should be spared. Economy should be there, but when life is not the best economy there then.
Yeah, again, we can't lock our country and our universe all the time, right? We should move on. So I think this is time that where we need to have a strike a balance, how we can prevent this transmission, but move on with our routine.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. We have another question from Madan.
Yeah. Doctor, is it required for people to take head bath daily when they go to office or come back home? Is it required for us to take head bath, or is it okay not to take? That is one question. The second question is, if a milk vendor or a vegetable vendor is affected by COVID, the vegetables or the milk what the person sells, will there be any contamination or this virus getting transmitted through that?
Okay. So I think your first question to take bath, if you speak to your ancestors, your grandma and grandfather, they always used to say, we go out, we always have a head bath outside our house, then only we enter the house. That is a good practice where you don't want to bring any infections, not necessarily COVID or anything, you have a good shower out and everything. I think here today we are unsure about the signs on COVID. We feel that you walk out, the COVID virus can stick to your hair. Okay. You can stick to your beard. You've got a lovely beard, and it can you can stick to that. And when you come and hug your dear and near one, it can transmit. We do not know the proper signs whether it will spread through or in your shirts and something. So I think it's a good practice until that time. I think better to have a good shower. As soon as you go out and come, and we all do that as part of the hospital. Not necessarily because of COVID, even. Those earlier days also, the minute when you come home, remove all your shirt, put it in your wash area and, have a shower. I think that should be practiced everywhere. Washing hands as soon as you enter. Even it's better to keep a tape outside our house. I think future model houses will come with COVID-friendly houses. That's what I think real estate people will win their prices. So washing and become these. So I think these are some of those things are good practices which will not only prevent COVID, but also a lot of other hygienic purposes. And your second question on milk vendor and vegetable, I think when you have been going and buying in these vegetable shops or in milk stores, the majority of the transmission happens from these people if they are affected through air. You're speaking to them. They might not be wearing a proper mask. They may be speaking to them, you can acquire. I think you need to have a physical distance wherever you go, wear a proper mask. If they're not wearing a mask, you can tell them. So that's one thing where you can prevent. Whether it will spread through the vegetables and milk, we do not have a proper science. But on the other hand, if many people have handled, probably he would have put in his mouth or in the nose and picked up a brinjal and put up in your bag. There is a possibility the virus can be there. How long it will be there, whether that will be transmissible, at this time we don't have proper science. So it's better to wash it. Or better to keep outside on hot sun for half an hour or 1 hour, at least it get inactivated. Even if it doesn't get killed, it get inactivated. So it won't be transmissible, then you can use it. Better to wash it, better to wash with, some people use a salt, whether that will be, we do not know. Some people are using soap to do this. I think better to wash very well and do that, because at this time science is very unclear. Regarding the milk, I think you buy the milk bag and put it and boil it. So it's
Correct.
not going to transmit anything to you.
Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Any other member who wants to ask any question?
Yes, doctor. What about ladies, doctor? Like when they have a long hair, they cannot wash daily when we come back from office or anything.
Yeah, doctor, I told you already you will have a lot of these questions. So please.
Yeah. But it's a very interesting question. I never thought that is a question. I think if I go back and see, I'm actually originally born and brought up in Kanyakumari on the borders with Kerala, and my family is half Keralites. You see these Keralite women, they always take a head bath. They have the longest hair than our Tamilians. They do that. And also in our hospitals, we got a lot of women staff, both nurses and doctors. They all have a long hair, but I'm sure they take head bath every day. So I don't think that is excuse that they should not have it. I think people tend to not to have a head bath. They think their hair may fall down or it will be like a little flabby and all those. I think now with all this happening, I think taking appropriate head bath, will prevent a lot of infections.
So they're prone to get cold when they take bath in the night and while sleeping in the air-conditioned room or anything. So people tend to get a cold. So for that reason, people we may avoid that one. How to address that one?
Yeah, I think in our hospitals, that's what we always wear a cap. Only my eyes will be known, there. So we always wear. I think probably if they don't want to take a head bath, they don't want to protect their hair, I think they have to wear a proper cap while they're going out so that they are not being carrying infection back to their home.
Exactly, doctor. I think this is a very good advice. So all the women who want to go out and shop and all that, I think we should ask them to start wearing those caps.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point.
Yes. Hi, doctor. Once more.
Yeah, doctor. You have a very young person who's going to ask you a question.
Just a small question. Once somebody has already been affected by COVID positive, is he now immune or he has to be the same careful way?
Okay. I think I answered this for a different question. So someone who is infected today, that means their body would have developed a substance called antibodies to fight against this virus. We call this COVID antibodies. Usually somebody develops an antibodies to any organism, either to a bacteria or a virus. As long as the antibodies are present, they will not develop infection from the same organism. For example, someone who has got an antibody to a virus, they will not develop the same similar viral infection. So similarly, someone who is with the COVID antibody, so they will, I won't use the word they will not, they need not develop. But what's happening now is now reports have started coming up of reinfection. People can develop. So why this happens is this COVID virus, so for you all, this is only called SARS-CoV-2. But on the other hand, for us, for biologists, it also has got a lot of substrains. There are a variety of different strains. In India, there are around 26 different COVID strains have been isolated by National Institute of Virology, by ICMR. So this, when they particularly antibody to only particular one strain, they can get infected by another strain. So quite possible. So that means someone who develop a COVID antibody, we don't tell them you don't need to wear a mask or anything. They still have to protect themselves. They can acquire another strain of COVID and they can succumb to that. I think it's very important. They should take all the precaution even after they develop.
But how long does this antibody would last?
I think the studies of now, again, this disease is very young. We started seeing only from January in China. So now it is only 78 years old. Already reports started coming up. People who developed antibodies in the month of February and March, these all started waning out. So these antibodies may not last long. Might be, I feel, 6 months to 12 months. It may go down, or the titer antibody level will go down. So they may not be enough to protect you. So, and again, same thing with the vaccine. If you give this vaccine, we don't have any vaccine today. So, but there are under development. If you give a vaccine, whether lifelong they are protected, we do not know. Probably they may need to keep giving vaccines every year. Like for H1N1 in swine flu, when we give a vaccine, it's protected only up to 12 months. So you may have to vaccinate again the following year. So similarly, it may come up with this. Again, it's too early to say. The science is so primitive.
So once somebody has already had a positive, he has been detected, after 14 days, he's supposed to be okay. And the corporation does not insist that you test again. Is it okay?
This because what we have seen is someone who is tested. The test what we do is what is called RT-PCR. It's a very sophisticated molecular test where we identify the genetic material of this virus. Either the genetic material is alive or dead will also be amplified in this particular test. So that means someone who is RT-PCR positive for COVID and they are completely relieved and cured of this, they can continue to be positive up to 3 months. This based on the studies from US CDC, Center for Disease Control. Because when you do this test, the dead particles can also be amplified and shown that. So for these reasons, now the guidelines are developed. You don't need another test up to 3 months. But if you are completely relieved of all the symptoms, then you can assume that you are being recovered from this disease, the minute when you become asymptomatic. In our hospital, VHS, what we are doing is someone who is positive, anytime after 10 days, we are doing another test, again using this nasal swab called antigen test, COVID antigen. So this is, we don't look into the virus directly, we look into some of those live viral particles. If they are negative, we can assume that they don't have a live virus. So with that, we can say that they are very safe, they may not transmit infection to others. I think this will become popular in the next couple of weeks' time. Now government is working on, we have already been shown that in VHS hospital, we have been publishing this finding in a journal.
But as of today, the corporation says no need to take any test, we are fine now. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. That's because they may continue to be positive, but they may not transmit infection to others.
Okay, thank you. Great. Thanks.
Doctor, I have a question. See, this originated in China, and early December, January, they identified. And if you see, I have a lot of friends in China, so I keep getting information. So by the end of March, when the other parts of the world was, having, the spread of the virus, by April, their economy revived and everything was back to normal. So how do you think, a country of population which is more bigger than India, how do you think they have achieved that?
This is a question to be debated in NDTV and others. So with
the nation wants to know, sir.
Yeah, I think the success story in China is, they found this infection and they quickly went rampantly, did testing. In India, it was very slow. If you look into the month of March, April, and May, very few tests were conducted. So that's because we didn't have much labs and the tests were so expensive. It was costed 4,500 rupees. Many people didn't want to do the testing. So China did was rampant. They went home to home because that's a communist country where you can do many things by the dictator. Went home to home, found people tested, they are positive. Immediately they took them to a quarantine home. So quarantine homes are not like our own, Chennai quarantine homes where they gave nil facilities in a school or hostel or in a corporation buildings. So they really took care of them also well. So they isolated all of them. The minute when they tested and isolated, their infectiousness came down. So they contained. If you look into China, their numbers didn't go like anything, right? They started early. And in China, I'm sure you traveled extensively. I have traveled extensively in China, in many places where I've seen how densely people live. But if you look into the Indian story, their population would have been, completely would have been wiped out with this disease, the way they live in most of the cities. But it didn't happen. That's because they quickly tested and isolated. And as a result, their infections came down and they started quickly reviving this economy. So in India, I think to your question, we are struggling now to prevent this infection. I'm using the word struggling. Anybody can say, our ministry can say that they are contained or anything, but that's not true. They're struggling. Every day new infections on the rise. I think once we contain these infections, then only we can say that whether our economy will start moving up. So today people are all worried. Nobody wanted to buy anything. So they wanted to conserve their money. So people have not bought any new shirts for months and months. I had a birthday in the month of June here. This probably is the first birthday I didn't wear a new shirt. so like this, similarly had happened, for everybody. I'm just giving an example. So people didn't want to, spend money. They want to conserve money because the whole world is. I think the minute when we contain infections, I think I'm very confident India will improve economy, but it's going to take time. I think our wealth has been destroyed. I think it's going to take to contain these infections. I'm not going to frighten you. It may take probably next year, middle or by end 2021.
Small question, Doctor.
Vishnu, 1 second. Doctor, you can actually advise us because even if your answers are going to be frightening, I hope the audience here understand the truth. So you please be free. Yeah, Vishnu, please.
Can I get my question in, please?
Yeah, please.
How far do you think that the figures are smudged in China?
Vishnu,
I really do not know. So I'm not a supporter of Trump here.
No. This is a question of a citizen of India who needs to know that if there is any smudging of information from China.
Yeah. So I think, for example, from every country, even same question I can ask you, sir. How or whatever we are seeing today, like 95,000 new cases in India, is it true, or should be more? Or same thing in the state of Tamil Nadu, we are seeing 5,900. So is it true? I think this type of questions will come. I think if you look into those, all those death and mortality coming from China, I think definitely they have contained. Probably, as you rightly said, probably they are not releasing much numbers out. They are always conservative. You know that. Both China and Russia never talk about what's happening inside. I think their numbers may not be correct. But one thing we have seen is they have moved very well. They
are efficient. I agree on that. Yeah. Another small interesting tidbit I would like to give you, because I have a classmate who is a leading pathologist in Hyderabad, and he went to an office and had the antibodies test done. Right. So he found that 35% of them were positive. So now here's a fact that has not been brought into discussion is herd immunity.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Where are we in herd immunity?
Right. So ICMR done some survey. I'm sure you would have seen in the media, in the newspapers and in the media. So in India, they have done in different towns and villages and in the cities. It is anything from 11% to 30% they have seen. In Chennai, it is almost around 20%, I think. And in Delhi, up to 27% they have seen. So that means people are being exposed to these, antibodies. So that means that so many people are exposed. Probably they didn't feel that they have been exposed and experienced any symptom. That's why they are not being tested. So if you put all those 20% across our population, our numbers are not just 50 lakhs. It could be we would have already crossed 5 crores or 50 crores now. So now coming to your herd immunity, this is something where again the definition is a herd immunity is when everybody in India are being infected with this virus, if they have been developed an antibody, so that means there won't be any transmission. So that means the herd, the crowd is being immune. Everybody have been infected. But here, so what we are seeing here is reports already started coming. People who have been infected already, they start developing a reinfection, right? So that means the herd immunity, making someone being infected, go through all this disease process, and so that herd immunity is going to occur. By doing so, you may harm him also, as well as he has every chance of getting he or she can get another infection. Another one, what we are seeing is, I didn't talk in my initial presentation about VHS. We also set up what is called post-COVID clinic. So patients who are being seen by us in the outpatients or who have been discharged from a hospital, after a month, we are asking for a follow-up, come for a regular checkup and everything. So every day around 5 to 6 or 7 people come every day as a post-COVID follow-up to a hospital. So what we are hearing from them is, variety of other bizarre manifestations. They are saying that they can't sleep. They have been completely relieved of COVID symptom, but now the complaints. So they are, someone was depressed. Someone of them say that, their heart conditions are worsening. Some of them diabetes still not controlled. So that means if you allow someone to develop this COVID, they may go through this all post-COVID complications. So I think this is something what as an infectious disease doctor, at this time I won't recommend. Some of those government recommended initially in England. So if you look at that, their Prime Minister himself openly came and said, Boris Johnson, that the herd immunity is something England is looking for. He said this next day he got affected. Then he was hospitalized, even went into an ICU. After that, he never, when he came out, he never spoke about that. Okay. And similarly happened in some of the Scandinavian countries where again, they started seeing infection. They never talked about it. I think this herd immunity, we need to understand a little more science. If the reinfection theory is there, then I think the herd immunity science will be obsolete.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
One last.
Vishnu, 1 second. Vishnu,
no,
1 second.
No, Sharath, excuse me. One last thing. How important is psychological consultation important for these COVID patients?
I think it's very important. For every disease, we need psychological counseling. Here, psychological counseling starts from soon after the diagnosis. Here, when you say somebody, we give a report, hey, you are COVID positive, they go through so many things. Some of them go through a fear, some of them go through an anchor, some of them yell at us, no, your test can be wrong, and or what will happen to them, or so many things all, happen. So your counseling starts from there. We are going to counsel them in a way that, hey, this is a disease occurred, now we have got treatment available, you have to go through them. From that onwards, towards their complete management, even after the when they are getting discharged, many of them now say, oh, something will happen to us or not. So I think this is an ongoing thing, part of things we do now in our hospital. Also, we do counseling. Now, we also have set up a dedicated VHS COVID support services managed by dedicated staff, where they do counseling for their relatives. Someone who is hospitalized in our hospital, the relatives need to know, or there someone's at home, what's happening with them. Because they go through a lot of psychological trauma, because they keep seeing in the media, people are dying of these and, what will happen to them. So I think there also we do a lot of counseling on them. Also, another thing what we are seeing is when they are completely recovered, when they go home, they also go through what is called post-traumatic stress. This is because someone, their family would have died in this COVID. Now what we are seeing is like clusters at home, 6 people are infected. 5 and out of them 2 are very elderly. One of them probably they go to the hospital and die. So I think the remaining are so depressed and gone through all those. I think there needs different types of counseling to them. And this is something, this disease came just like it came and wiped people, especially very elderly people and people with multiple comorbidities. And they were all so much fine with them. They were celebrating different functions all with these grandpas and grandmothers, and suddenly it all happened. So I think it's a big trauma, people, went through. I think counseling, psychological counseling is needed throughout and even after.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah, Vishnu, I hope you're satisfied. Yeah.
I will resume only with a word of thanks.
Yeah, Doctor. So now we also have Suresh also who has come back. Doctor, now on behalf of the members here, now when we develop the symptoms, the fever, sore throat, and all that. Now, the thing, what is that you advise? See, everybody knows you have to take paracetamol, you have to take azithromycin 500 and this and that. Now, now actually we want to hear it from you. Either Dr. Suresh or Dr. Kumarasamy, anyone.
I think because it's a clinical thing, let Kumarasamy answer for that.
Yeah, sure, sir. Thank you. So I think, this is a very important question, what you asked. So if you have something, not even sore throat, something scratching in your throat, what should I do? I think you do all the regular things you do. Someone, you develop a mild sore throat. What do you do? Immediately, you're not going to take medicines, right? At home, what you do is salt gargle. And if you have a fever, immediately, you take a paracetamol. My suggestion is to do what is that. But on the other hand, if the fever continues more than 2 days or 3 days, if your pain worsens, that is also being events coming up and cough and breathing. I think my suggestion is rather than you self-medicate, you should immediately seek help from your family doctor. So immediately, I'm sure most of you would have their family doctor. Either go in person or call them over the phone what to do, whether you need a COVID testing. And many times your family doctor will say that you should do a COVID testing if you've got fever of 3 days or more, sore throat more, and cough, or any shortness of breath. And also, even little aggressively, anybody who's been little elderly and as well as with comorbid condition, we tell them aggressively get a test done. Because we can do a lot of intervention if you know them they are COVID positive. If you do not know, then we'll be like also beating around the bush in managing them. So I think if things are not going well after 2 or 3 days when you have been self-medicating, I think better to go to your doctor. And any times you complain in this particular disease, any shortness of breath, you park your car or your vehicle, come home or take a steps, you feel that breathing problem along with fever, my suggestion is go and get tested. It's very important. So that means we can prevent a major catastrophic event if you go to the hospital very early. So again, in my experience, what we have seen is all this 20-odd deaths, majority of the deaths happened because they came very late, where for us very little to intervene. I think they come little early, and we have got whatever available measures, we'll be able to save people.
So, doctor, you're basically saying that we should try the self-medication only for 2 or 3 days, and if it doesn't work, immediately go to the doctor.
Again, self-medication only for minor things. You got a mild sore throat or fever or body pain. If you got a shortness of breath, don't self-medicate. Go to your doctor.
Okay, doctor. Thank you.
Sharath, I just have a quick question. Can I ask?
Yeah, please.
Doctor, I just one question I have is regarding just an average cost, because I hear people saying for an admission it costs about 10 to 12 lakhs, 15 lakhs, those kind of big numbers, right? So based on the admissions that you had in your hospital, is there any ballpark number that you can provide on the cost of treatment? Yeah.
Sure. Sir, Dr. Suresh, you want to answer? Or
Yes. Yeah, doctor. The main reason you have to tell the members here is the cost effectiveness of VHS. I wish everybody hears this from Dr. Suresh.
So VHS has always been, we have our byline is affordable health care. Now what we do is, because our equipments, we get donation, we are able to pass on the benefit of the capex to the patient. So our billing will be much lower, and even our bed charges, ward charges, everything will be lower, including our laboratory charges, because Rotary Club of Northwest was the one who supported our diagnostic laboratory. And in this time, we also got some support from other things. And so we've got a very well-equipped laboratory. And we can keep the cost nearly 30% to 35% less than what others are able to do. And that is the key thing, because I will give you an example of a lady who was admitted with us for almost 19 days. 19 days she was in the hospital, including she was in the COVID ICU and then into the COVID special ward. And she had an ankle fracture and she had a spine fracture. Now this patient was treated for COVID, and she was the ankle fracture surgery was done and the spine surgery was also done. All this put together, her bill came to only 3.8 lakhs for 19 days. Okay. Most of the time, the Tamil Nadu government has stipulated some COVID treatment charges. Now, for the general ward patients. Now, we have synchronized our charges with what the prescribed government charges are, which means we don't charge more. So that is the essence. Now, recently, we have now got a ward, a general ward, but with lot of private space. We have put partitions in between beds and all that. That the bed charges are only 1,500 rupees per day. If you go into a C-class ward with the individual rooms but a common toilet, it is only 2,500 rupees a day. So our cost, we could have been even lower. But what happened is all the staff nurses and the workers, they demanded more. They wanted a risk allowance to be given to them. So the cost of salaries went almost 1.5 times what it was done before. And we have now taken insurance for all of them. as a COVID insurance has been taken for all of them in case they have a problem and all that. So those things have pushed up the cost. Otherwise, but in spite of that, we've been able to keep our costs low. So this is the reason why VHS is low in cost.
Yeah.
Around 1.5 lakhs is the average billing that will come for it.
Yep.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.
So I think your question in a nutshell, hospital, if someone gets admitted with severe COVID, goes to ICU, be in the hospital for 10 days to 14 days, receives antivirals, receive all of the supportive medications, sometimes they may also ventilator and everything. The maximum cost you can expect is around 2 lakhs or something, maximum. And minimum, they don't need to go into a ventilator. Sometimes they may not need an antiviral, only the supportive medicine, some oxygen support. It could be anything around 50,000 or 60,000 or even less. So this is something what you'll never see in any other corporate hospitals, where the cost minimum will be like 7 lakhs and go up to 25 or 30 lakhs. Here, again, the investigations here in VHS is like 1/4 as compared to any other corporate hospitals. And again, in the medications, by negotiation with the drug companies, we're able to get an affordable price for our patients.
Okay.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
I'd also like to add one more thing. Till December, I have an organization which is supporting patients who cannot afford for investigations in COVID. Up to 50,000 rupees per patient, up to 40,000 rupees per patient. They will cover the lab costs for COVID treatment for up to 50 patients. So they have sanctioned 20 lakhs. That fund is available. Any patient poor patient who comes who cannot afford these investigations, then you find the cost goes down drastically, because it's only the bed charges 1,500 rupees a day, plus the medical consultation and the PPE kit costs and all those things also. So we can support that. And what we have done at the beginning of COVID, what happened? There was a driver who had an accident. His entire face was smashed. 3 hospitals refused admission. He came to VHS. He did not have any money on hand. His total treatment, neurosurgery, orthopedic surgery, facial-maxillary surgeon, and finally plastic surgery, the entire bill was 3.25 lakhs. The hospital underwrote the whole thing. We did not charge him a single pie because he did not have money on hand. So we in those very critical cases where really cannot afford, we don't send away patients because they can't afford. So some mechanism will be there, some support will be there. Whatever we can, we will be able to support. So that's another, and also another company which is there, they have agreed to support up to 60 patients. So we have, all we want the community is utilize our facility.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you. Dr. Suresh and Dr. Kumarasamy, it has been a very, very interesting session with you. And it has been almost close to 1 hour 45 minutes. But I'm sure, the members want to ask a lot of questions to you. Can we take one final question and close the session?
Sure.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Sharad, can I ask? I'm Sujata here.
Please. Yeah, please, Sujata.
Yeah, thank you, doctors, for your very lucid discussion. I have a slightly longish question. See, I work in an organization which is fairly big, and we are supposed to work 50% of the employees. So on any particular day, we are almost 300 people in the office. And, it's not always possible to maintain a social distance in our office. So, and every day, 2-3 people, every week, 2-3 people turn out to be positive. We have a doctor residing in the office. And then people come with symptoms to the office, they have come with fever, the doctor prescribes a test and then they go. Though we tell them not to come to office, they end up coming to office thinking it's some other ailment, but the doctor prescribes, and some of them turn out to be positive. In the initial stages, when people were turning out to be positive, we shut down the entire office for a couple of days, disinfected. Then it became like only the particular department or the floor gets disinfected. Now it's like, okay, at the end of the day, when everybody goes home, we'll disinfect the particular office. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So what should be the ideal protocol when somebody is positive in the office? Like now, only we find out a list of contacts in the office, and we ask them to self-quarantine for about 10 days. So what should be the actual protocol for disinfecting the office as well as for the people whom they came in contact with? And in spite of such density, I mean, there is no evidence that there is a person-to-person contact has happened in the office, and that is why somebody else has got infected. All the infection seems to be coming from outside and not because of contact in the office. In such a scenario, how much is too much of sterile environment in the office? Like, is it very, I mean, I don't think it is very good to keep sterilizing the environment so often or disinfecting it so often, or having air purifiers, disinfectants in the office. What is your take on this, Doctor?
So I think the question what you heard is very important, relevant. If you see, the history, what happened since March, when someone has been infected in any office, even in a police station, they completely closed the police station for a week. It had gone through. Even if you see in Mumbai, not happened much in Chennai. If one patient was positive, they even closed down the whole hospital for a week. So it's all happened in the month of March, April, and something where people didn't know what to do with them. So then over a period of time, then they started selling only that room should be thing. And because this is thinking that whereas this fomite transmission can be also spread through the air, spread through the surface. So today we don't have a proper science on that. So I think that is not needed. I think what you're doing in your office is correct. Where sterilizing that particular place where the person sits, because I'm sure you would have kept his hand and probably hanky and something where probably there could be a virus particle. We do not know that it transmits. So I think making sterilizing is enough. I think closing down the whole office and everything, that is all not recommended because it spreads the air. It has spread by the time. I think one thing I'll recommend to all of you are either you have a 2-room office with 2 staff, or you got a 300 people office with hall. I think have a well-ventilated place. This is something what you have to do, little orientation to your staff. We had lived all our lives in all types of air conditioners and all the cozy environment. Now we need to have what is called new normal. The new normals are plenty. One thing is you need to sweat. So we can't keep enjoying all those because we need to be safer. I think keep more ventilated thing, or even if you're using air conditioners, maybe every other hour, shut down your air conditioner and keep all the windows open. That will save electricity also and prevent a lot of infections. And make sure that your housekeeping is very strict. I'm sure many of them, at the end of the day, when you leave, somebody wipes and things. I'm not sure how they do it in a very honest way. Now you make sure that they do it well. Wiped all the area well, and toilets are cleaned very well with the proper sodium hypochlorite and other disinfectant. And because now reports coming up that this virus can be alive in the stool, so people install. So I think the bathrooms should be kept very clean. I think these are some of the things we need to improve as part of our hygienic process. And good thing we should do, we should keep a well ventilated places. If your air conditioner is on, make sure that your windows are open. Your air conditioners might get damaged, might be sooner, but still it's worth to prevent this infection.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah. One final take from Dr. Suresh, and we will end the meet.
Yeah.
Dr. Suresh, you want to say anything? Hello.
First of all, I think this has been a very this has been a lovely meeting. Thank you very much for long. I think one of the long Rotary meetings, weekly meetings. And it is delightful to see Dr. Vishnu Srinivas here. Thank you so much for your kind words. I'm totally overwhelmed by the words. And the questions which are asked were absolutely spot on. These are the real issues which everybody faces, especially the last question. We have gone through that all the time in our own institution. When a patient came positive, we shut down a scan room. Then first we shut down a floor, then we shut down a scan room, and then we said no need to shut down at the end of the day. So this was the way we went through. I think it's everybody's minds, and a lot of clarity has come. Thank you, Dr. Kumarasamy.
Sir, only one question from my side.
Yes.
Yeah, Praveen, please. Final question, please.
Yeah, final.
Yeah,
Small questions.
Last question. Yeah.
Three type of questions. Small question only. So like Sujata already is asked about that. Even though just I wanted to ask from my side, how do I treat patients with confirmed COVID-19? First question. The second question, how do I establish effective stop safety protocols? And the third one is, you have any rough idea when we get freedom from the COVID?
So I think we all have a strict treatment protocol. When we have a confirmed COVID infection, we grade them asymptomatic, mild, moderate, and severe. Based on that, we treat them, in our hospital. So, and to your question on when we get freedom from COVID, the quick answer is we do not know. I think based on the numbers going up, I think I'm not again frightening you all. Probably it may go on till mid of next year, or probably even up to 2021 end. So one thing I like to tell you, based on these projections, which the government has not released, which you'll see some sort of a bombshell, we may see some worst pandemic in the month of November to December. So you may expect another one, severe lockdown can happen. So now in some countries, they're also already been cautioning that we may have some deadly December. So this is something, when you're having manufacturing units and factories, you may have to be planned appropriately because the numbers are going up, lockdown is lifted, more infections will happen. So then probably another relaxation will happen. So I think to your question, freedom, I think our freedom will be new normal, wearing a mask, physical distancing, and swim through this life.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bala. Thanks, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah. Thanks,
thank you, Doctor.
It was really wonderful. Really wonderful. A very, very informative session. And I'm sure, the entire members of our club and the guests would have got excellent answers for their doubts. Thanks a lot. Yeah, Bala, over to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sharath. Thank you, Doctor. Now move on to next agenda, secretary announcements. We have next week we have award meeting next week Wednesday, and now we move on to birthday celebrations. Today, Nareshji, please ready to put spotlight on them. Our Rotarian Sridharan celebrating his birthday today, and Uttara Anna Sriganth celebrating her birthday today. Dr. Deepa Anna Vinarva Dariwal also celebrating birthday today. I think Sriganth is available here. Can you put spotlight on him? Yeah. And Sushmita Anatov Shaji celebrating birthday on 17th September. Hema Anaf Ishwar celebrate birthday on 18th September. Anuradha Anaf Bhaskaran celebrate birthday on 21st September. Sheila Anatov Sadiq celebrate birthday on 21st September. Ganesh Lakshman Anatov Ram Jr. celebrating birthday on 21st September. Rotarian Dinesh celebrating his birthday on 22nd. Nega Anatov Prane Sinha celebrating birthday on 22nd September. Lakshmi Anatov Ram Senior celebrate birthday on 22nd September. Rotarian Sridhar V celebrate birthday on 23rd September. First Lady Nandini put spotlight on Sharath. Nareshji. First Lady Nandini celebrate birthday on 23rd September. Shalom Johanna Anatov Suresh Franklin celebrate birthday on 23rd September. Number 100 Rotarian Uvasis and Anne Afrina celebrating wedding anniversary on 23rd September. Yeah. Thank you, Sharath.
Bala. You have a very big list.
President Sharath, can I have your permission to have a little bit of an extended vote of thanks?
Yeah, hopefully all the people should stay.
Yeah, I'm sure they will, because it involves the COVID situation too. So I've already told you about, I've thanked Dr. Suresh. He's a legend, he's a professor, and he's an inspiration for people like me. I mean, no words to describe that. The second thing I would like to say is the quicksand effect of this COVID pandemic, because every now and then we are changing what we are thinking about this pandemic. You know, treatments change, everything changes. So the quicksand effect is what I would label this. Finally, I compliment and thank Dr. Kumaraswamy for motivating his team and his teamwork, and I cannot thank him enough for his expertise though, because it is so important to motivate the team. I've been at the receiving end of this, and I have done this in the Lions Club where about nearly 120 employees I had to motivate. So I know how difficult it is, and Dr. Kumaraswamy, I compliment you for having done this. Finally, when I talk about, we have already discussed about this, so I'm not going to go more into this, basically the antibody testing. The only thing that has been unsaid is that what Dr. Kumaraswamy has mentioned is that there are so many strains, which means there have been mutations of this virus, which makes it more difficult to produce either a vaccine or herd immunity. So that's where we are standing right now. And one thing which has not been mentioned has been the cytokine storm, which is basically an immunity reaction. So we all think immunity is good, but there is a rogue immunity, which is one of this is the cytokine storm, and the other is autoimmunity. And finally, I would like to mention a very common thing that I've observed in the public. People wear woolen gloves and, you know, cloth gloves, which is more damaging than, you know, just hand sanitization. So please stick to hand sanitization. And Dr. Kumaraswamy has mentioned about remdesivir, which was not actually designed to counter COVID-19, but another disease, but seems to be useful. We are not too sure. Dr. Kumaraswamy can illuminate us on that. But with this, I thank both Dr. Suresh and Dr. Kumaraswamy for giving us this opportunity to having this illuminating discussion on COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Vishnu Srinivas.
This meeting with the experts, Dr. Suresh and Dr. Kumaraswamy, is adjourned. Thank you very much.